My name is Brigida Blasi. I go by Bree because no one can pronounce Brigida. I'm the curator and director of the Sweetwater County Museum in Green River, Wyoming. I was born in Green River. I grew up there, and I got out of town as soon as I could and went to college. And then I came back about 15 years later to run the museum because I absolutely love the history here. My great-grandparents on my mother's side immigrated to Superior, Wyoming from Val d'Unon, from Cloze, in the early 1900s. My great-grandfather came about 1909, and he went back in 1924 to marry my grandmother. They came to work in the coal mines, as a lot of people did. They lived in Superior until the late 1940s, early 1950s. My grandmother, who was born in Superior, married a man who worked for the railroad, and so they moved to Rawlins, Wyoming for a little while he worked there, and then he was transferred back to Green River, which is not far from Superior, and so my family's been in Green River ever since. So Rock Springs is a town on the Union Pacific Main Line, the Transcontinental Railroad, the first railroad to go all the way across the United States. It was founded mostly because of the coal that was found there. So the Union Pacific was moving along the country, and they were doing all these surveys as they went along, the government and the railroad, to see what kind of resources were available. They found really rich coal seams here and in Carbon County and throughout Wyoming. And so Rock Springs, Superior, all these other towns that were founded here in the 1860s through the 1920s, many of them were formed in order to mine coal. Later on, the Union Pacific moved pretty much along the same route as the immigrant trails, and then later Interstate 80, which we're traveling on now, followed also pretty much the same route. Before Interstate 80 was here, the Lincoln Highway came through, and the Lincoln Highway, just like the Transcontinental Railroad was the first railroad to go all the way across the country, the Lincoln Highway was the first highway to go all the way across the country, and that came through in 1912. So we have a long history of travel here as well. So lots of people have passed through our fine towns here over the years. We actually had a fairly large population of Tyrolean immigrants here, mostly from Val d'Unon. They came to work in the coal mines, and then later became, quite a few of them anyway, became business people. They owned saloons and butcher shops, a couple of mercantiles, which were very important because in the history of coal mining, and this is true throughout the United States and other countries, coal towns were often what they referred to as company towns. So you were pretty indebted to the company. So when these Tyrolean immigrants decided to band together to create their own mercantile where people could buy their supplies and not be indebted to the company store, that was a very important part of all the immigrants here creating their own identity, making this place their home. So it wasn't just about the job, it was creating their home in America. And so they were business people, they owned ranches, they really created a community here through their mutual aid societies, through their lodges and other ethnic associations and clubs and groups that they had. And so it's really fascinating to see how, even though this was an extremely ethnically diverse place, people came from literally all over the world to work in the coal mines, and there were good relations with the Slovenians and in the early days the Italians and all these different groups, but somehow they still banded together and made these great ethnic clubs and communities here. One of my favorite things is the gardens that they grew out in these coal camps. If you can see behind me, the desert landscape. They really had to work hard to make lush and beautiful flower and vegetable gardens, but they did it in order to create this beautiful, comfortable home for themselves and their families. So I think it's a really interesting story here. There's still a lot of descendants here who have become very prominent people in the community, from U.S. senators down to business owners. And so they've really made their mark here and created a long-lasting community.